Welcome to Pragya, Dr. Susanne. I'd like to know what about Mustang that you think is really inspirational because not many people in the world actually know about.
Mustang, Upper Mustang especially have been neglected by the Hindu government of Nepal. And since it was opened now, they also participate in tourism, which helped them over the years quite a lot. But it was opened, and that is something which is interesting after the so-called democracy was introduced to Nepal. Mustang slowly but steadily became part of the Western kingdom. And in the 15th century, Mustang was well established as a part of the Western kingdom, and the whole western area was called Naari.
Welcome to Pragya, Dr. Susanne. Welcome, and really appreciate your time with us. And my first question to you is, how did you find out so much time and energy and information to write all these many books? What inspired you? What part of Buddhism inspired you? What teachings of his inspired you?
Well, a good question. Sometimes I don't know myself. It's just coming out of myself. And actually, to tell you the truth, I haven't written many books. I've written some books, but not as many as I heard today during the conference others have written about. When I see, for example, Basant Bidari, who works in Lumbini as an archaeologist, he has written the most fascinating books about Lumbini. And I would love to be able to write and know so much as he does. But I have written, of course, a little bit on Nepal and a little bit on certain heritage sites. I was working for UNESCO many years before, and in that capacity I have done certain books. And also when I came the first time to the Himalayas, I've worked with certain groups who lived in Mustang or live in Mustang, and I've written books on that. But and of course, travel guidebooks. In those days, we also were asked to write travel guidebooks, and I did this. And of course, it's always a very big activity for me because I have a lot of other things to do, and especially for the Himal Asia Foundation, which is a foundation that was founded by late Tulku Naari Rinpoche, who unfortunately is no more. But he has taught me a lot, and he had helped me to find myself and do something for myself. And in Buddhism, which of course I knew before very well, because I traveled a lot in India and in Tibet and in Nepal, and I was partly staying in Nepal. But I never understood Buddhism as much as I learned when I saw how he was living. And himself, how he was living and doing and behaving towards others gave me the biggest, or had the biggest impact on my life, because when he was no more, I knew I had to carry on with his legacy. Of course, I never can be a priest, certainly not, but at least the way how he was acting with other sentient beings, the kindness and the patience he had, is incredible, or was incredible, and I never will reach that level, but I try my level best to help wherever I can, and Himal Asia is a vehicle for me to do that.
I understand you were born in Germany.
That's true.
But your soul traveled to India and Nepal.
Well,
to find yourself.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I didn't go to India to find myself, to tell you the truth. In those days, when I went the first time to India, we went overland, and we had 2 old Mercedes transporters, and it was quite at those days when we called it the hippie time. And my dream was, when I finished my high school, because we were influenced by our teacher who taught us in the subject religion, and who taught us not only about Christianity, but also about Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam. And he himself, who was from a German school in Cairo, he took us to that school, even though my city, Detmold, which is very small, has only 80,000 inhabitants. But he made an exchange program between that city and Cairo German school. So I learned a little bit about the Islam, and then I wanted to know more about other religions. And in those days, we were all great fans of the Beatles, and especially of George Harrison. Mm-hmm. And he has made great connections with Maharishi, I believe, one of your great yogis of the past. And in fact, I was a great fan as well of Yehudi Menuhin and Ravi Shankar, and they had a program that was called East Meets West.
Yes, I attended that myself
and
as well.
It was just heartbreaking for me when I heard the music of Ravi Shankar, and it influenced me a lot. And I never will forget when I saw him in Calcutta, as well as later I met his daughter Anushka, because the music that he was playing just touched my heart. And in this way, also coming back to your questions, my heart was touched by the life of late Naari Rinpoche, because he gave such a good example how you can be when you follow certain principles. And to tell you the truth, I learned more about that after he was no more than I knew before he was there with me,
I'd like to know, what about Mustang that you think is really inspirational? Because not many people in the world actually know about such an old civilization that has existed over time and has actually just been a jewel for the privileged ones. Would you tell me a little bit of its location and a little bit about what could have been the way it is today?
Well, an interesting question. First of all, Mustang was or is a place where in 78 when I came, and 2 years later I went to Mustang of the southern part, which was open, and I heard about Upper Mustang, but I also heard that actually the people over there were living in quite a poverty because they couldn't get all the benefits that the people who lived in southern Mustang, the Takalis actually, they profited from having been opened by the government as a place for trekking tourism. And so they started to be involved in trekking tourism and could earn quite well out of it. And the people from Upper Mustang, who were mainly engaged in cattle breeding and agriculture and small-scale trade, they of course were comparing their work with what they saw with the Takalis. And they also wanted to participate in what they saw with the Takalis.
With the way it's located and the way it is heard about, I've just heard stories about it, that it's got these caves, and in those caves it's meant that monks have meditated, and a little bit of on the way the energy of that place is. And how did you feel when you arrived there?
Well, when I first arrived there, that was shortly after it has opened in 1992, it was overwhelming. It was absolutely overwhelming. I mean, I had seen and met the people who came down during winter time because it's too cold in Upper Mustang to stay over the winter. So most of them came down to Kathmandu and Pokhara. And so I had met them. And of course, the former king of Mustang, I had met him and his family. And it was very, very interesting to talk with them. And so when Mustang opened in 1992, I was completely overwhelmed because I could sense what kind of great culture it has been before. A lot of places had been deteriorated in those days because Mustang, Upper Mustang especially, have been neglected by the Hindu government of Nepal. And since it was opened now, they also could participate in tourism, which helped them over the years quite a lot. But it was opened, and that is something which is interesting, after the so-called democracy was introduced to Nepal. And then people from the West also started to travel to Mustang.
Is it for its energy? Is it for its architecture? Is it for its people? Or is it, what do you think it is? Because how I've understood, you come from Germany, and you come from a very established country, and you're going to somewhere which is challenged in its resources. The weather could be challenging, the resources could be challenging, and perhaps the government was not that helpful. But what took you there? What took you to that spiritual path of meeting these people? Is it because they were Buddhists, or what was it? Anything that inspired you in the culture of these people that took you there?
as I mentioned before, I was working with the Chakalis for quite some time already and had written something about them in 2 books. And so I always wanted to see how Upper Mustang was, because I knew it was a very ancient culture and nothing to do with the Chakali culture. And that actually the Tibetan kingdom was the southernmost outpost of Western Tibetan kingdom in those days was Mustang. And so I was fascinated by that. And in the winter times, when I was sitting together with the family of Mustang people, we call them Loba, or when I was sitting with the king's family together and they were explaining me about Mustang and showed me some photos, I said, I had an inner feeling that I wanted to see that. There was always a drive in me and an urge in me to see that area. And later, and of course, when I came the first time, as I mentioned, it was overwhelming, but I also learned that this area was called Naari, and the Western Kingdom, which was founded in the 10th century under a king called Yeshe-Ö in West Tibet, whose family had to flee from Lhasa and established their own dynasty in Western Tibet,
right,
in Saparang and in Guge. They had in mind to extend the area, and Mustang slowly but steadily became part of the Western Kingdom. And in the 15th century, Mustang was well established as a part of the Western Kingdom, and the whole Western area was called Naari.
But you said the energy that inspired you, the history about the place that inspired you. Does the energy still exist there? If I was to say to someone like, or if I was to experience it myself, what is that energy? Because it's not something you see.
You see, I just was explaining about the name Naari, and later when I got to know my late consort, Tulku Zongtsa Naari Rinpoche, I figured out that actually the first Naari Tulku came from that area,
Wow.
Not from Mustang, but from Naari. We don't know exactly from where, but he went most probably in the 13th century, he went with another great master, Buddhist master called Pakpa, who later became the vice king of Tibet, having been lived in the Yuan period of the 13th century when the Mongol, Kublai Khan, Mongol Khan over there was brought up with him together. And actually Pakpa and Naari Rinpoche went to an area called Kham, where they established a new monastery. And this is where Naari Rinpoche is coming from. And my late consort's name was, and background was the 17th Naari Rinpoche. So I believe this very special feeling of having this urge to come to Mustang has to do with this equilibrium.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what I believe, because later it came out clear for me that it was because of that,
Wow.
that it really pulled me into that area, you know.
And children today are so bereft of this. They are so, the knowledge about feeling of these places, these stupas, the monasteries.
It's very heartbreaking when you see
it?
now that actually because of a lot of tourism, people start to build in concrete over there. And they always used to build in rammed earth technique and in brick technique. And even though we had a bad earthquake in 2015, but after that, we tried to help people in Upper Mustang to get a knowledge how they also with certain techniques can still build in their traditional way with bricks. And of course, rammed earth is much, much stronger than concrete. But unfortunately, because of too much tourism, those areas will be spoiled in future. I'm quite sure about that. So an ancient kingdom is under threat in the moment because of tourism.
Right. And do you think it's a lack of knowledge? Because it's currently how we see it, that we are completely aware modernization is evolved in the last 100 years. And the subject of the knife stays the same. The object is the same. You can kill, save, or, cut and an animal and just harm someone and whatever it may be. But the object remains the same. So tourism will expand because modernization has expanded. Children are still not talked about energy in the education system.
Which
They're
is so
not spoken
important.
about the energy of these places and the history that goes behind it, because as understood by some of your books, that it matters the place of any religion or any place of healing is technically been because of its spiritual energy or the energy of the land there. And what gravitated you was the lineage in your finding yourself and finally arrived at your destination. What's that message for the children that you would give to the world about traveling to such places?
Especially to the children, you mean?
Yes.
Well, I mean, we talked this morning also about including and incorporating in curricula in schools meditation practice, which I very much support. And we have schools in Mustang that we supported where we have included curricula like that. And in a completely other area, which is very similar to Mustang here in India, in Ladakh, I'm working closely with Venerable Bhikkhu Sanghasena, who has a wonderful Mahabodhi meditation center, an international center, where he has started to build schools many years before for girls and for boys, where part of the curricula are meditation classes. And I believe if you do this, you become a better personality because you think much more about yourself and what you could do for others than the opposite, you know. And in fact, I really...
What about the Western system? Because you come from Germany and, you know, the world has a lot more countries, etc. So what is keeping them away from this knowledge or the need to understand this knowledge?
What keeps them away is a very difficult question, because if you want to, you could get into it. But it seems our Western world is so overwhelmed by indifference and by indulgence and by also materialism, and thinking that these are the main wealths around you that you should get during your lifetime. They lack spirituality. And when you see, for example, our Christian church in alone Germany, I mean in many other areas as well, less and less people are visiting churches, less and less people, even though they are Christians, they are very much thinking of others, but they try to organize themselves now and trying to do their work themselves without a body of the church, you know.
So without the community,
yes.
And it's not exactly community-based, rather it's just more individualistic.
It's community-based partly, but they don't want to have the institution of the church anymore. So they have their own ways of getting together. That's what I see more and more. Like in civil societies all over the world, you see when people are not d'accord with their government anymore. And also our church in Germany had been part of the government. Actually, right. We always talk about separating them, but actually, unfortunately, there was not so much of a separation.
About uniting them and taking it towards a community-based community. When I say world as one community, community when I say it's like children of the future. They may not see these architects, they may not see the relevance of these stupas, they may not see the relevance of spiritual places. And if you were to give them one message about their energy of and the combination of India and Buddhism, what would that be?
I would ask them, and especially also their teachers, because they sometimes organize travels for school classes. I would ask them, please try to organize to come to India and visit certain places here, like the Mahabodhi Center. And I mean, it's difficult, of course, for many people to pay for plane tickets or something like this, but I find this idea of incorporating meditation in your curricula very important, and I will do my level best to disseminate this message with school teachers that I know in Germany as well, because I'm always in summer in Germany and European countries, and I'm talking a lot with people.
Excellent. So we at Pragya also feel it's all about the mind, body, and breath.
Right.
And the knowledge of the self needs to be integrated into the education system. It needs to be addressed by the governments. It needs to be addressed by the world leaders, and it needs to be addressed by people who are of science and spirituality, to integrate a system that can actually work from year one onwards. Because as we are always evolving and as the body is always changing, our mind and breath also changes with it. Our needs and desires also shift. So that's exactly what we'd like to do. And thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Namaste.
With pleasure.
Thank you.